Picture this for a second. You're sitting at your kitchen table, it's like 11 at night, and you've got your laptop open to your bank account, and you're doing that thing where you refresh the page like the number's going to magically change if you just look at it hard enough. You've got a decent job. You're not reckless with money. You pay your bills on time. You're not out here buying Lambos or whatever. And yet there's this quiet, nagging voice in the back of your head going, am I actually going to be okay? Like when I'm 65, 70, whatever. Am I going to be fine? Or am I going to be one of those people still working part-time at the grocery store because the math just never worked out? Honestly, most people carry that question around like a stone in their pocket. They don't talk about it much, but it's there. It's there when they see a Facebook memory of a vacation they took 8 years ago and think about how they still haven't recovered financially from it. It's there when a coworker retires and everyone says, good for them. But secretly, everyone's doing math in their head going, wait, how did they afford that? My name is Steve, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, like an unreasonable amount of time, and specifically about why some people seem to just glide into a comfortable retirement while other people who work just as hard, saved just as diligently, sometimes even earn more, end up stressed and scrambling in their 60s. Because here's the thing that took me forever to understand. It's not mainly about income. It's not even mainly about how much you save. There are actually behavioral signs, small, almost invisible patterns, that predict, with kind of scary accuracy, whether someone's going to retire comfortably or retire anxious. And that's what I want to walk through with you today. 3 signs, 3 things that, if they're true about you, honestly put you ahead of the vast majority of people, even people who make more money than you do right now. And if they're not true yet, that's actually good news too, because all 3 of them are things you can build. None of this requires you to suddenly triple your salary or inherit money from a relative you've never met. Stick with me, because I think by the end of this, you're going to look at your own financial life a little differently, maybe even breathe a little easier. Let's get into it. Okay, so here's the first one, and I think it's the biggest one, honestly. Even though it sounds kind of obvious when I say it out loud, people who retire richer than most think in decades, not in paychecks, not even in years, really. In decades. Let me explain what I mean, because this isn't just some fluffy have a vision thing. There's a very concrete difference in how 2 people can look at the exact same $200 in their budget. Person A looks at that $200 and thinks, cool, that's a nice dinner out, or new shoes, or I'll put it toward my next trip. And look, there is nothing wrong with that. I want to be really clear. I'm not the guy who's going to sit here and tell you that you can never enjoy your money. That's a miserable way to live. But person A is making a decision inside a very short time horizon. They're thinking about this month, maybe this quarter. Person B looks at that same $200 and some part of their brain, sometimes consciously, sometimes it's just become a habit, goes, what does this become in 30 years? And that's a wildly different question, because $200 a month invested and left alone for 30 years at a reasonable average return isn't $72,000. It's closer to $200,000, sometimes more, depending on the market. That's the wild, almost unfair magic of compound growth. Money makes money, and then that money makes money, and it kind of snowballs in this way that feels slow at first, and then suddenly doesn't. I think about it like planting a tree. Nobody plants an oak tree and stands there staring at the dirt expecting shade the next afternoon. You plant it, you water it occasionally, and then you basically forget about it for years while it's doing this quiet, invisible work underground that you can't see. And then one day, and this always kind of shocks people, you look up and there's this massive tree that's been providing shade for a decade. That's what decade thinking does to your money. It's not exciting in the moment. It's actually kind of boring, if I'm honest. But boring is often the price of wealth. Nobody makes a viral TikTok about, I left my index fund alone for 22 years. There's no drama in it, but that's exactly why it works, because it's not competing with your impulses every single day. Here's a story that always sticks with me. Knew is generous. More like I overheard this at a coffee shop once. One of those moments where you're clearly eavesdropping, but you tell yourself you're not. 2 women talking, and one of them was maybe mid-50s, and she said something like, I don't even remember deciding to save for retirement. I just remember deciding I wasn't going to touch that account, ever, no matter what. And that stuck with me because it wasn't about some genius investment strategy. It was a decision made once and then just never revisited, never renegotiated with herself in a moment of weakness. That's decade thinking. So here's the actionable piece. If you want to know whether you're a decade thinker, ask yourself this. When you get a raise, what's the first thought that goes through your head? Is it, ooh, more spending room? Or is it, even for a split second, how much of this can I lock away before I get used to having it? That reflex, that split-second instinct is worth training. Start small. Next time you get any extra money, a bonus, a refund, whatever, try automatically moving half of it somewhere you can't easily touch before your brain even registers it as yours to spend. You're basically tricking your future self into being rich. And honestly, your future self deserves that trick. All right, second sign, and this one is sneaky because it's not about how much you make at all, it's about the gap. There's this thing that happens to almost everybody and it's got a name. It's called lifestyle creep, and man, is it a silent killer. You get a promotion, you start making, I don't know, 10 or 15,000 more a year, and it feels like, finally, right? Finally some breathing room. And within about 6 months, that breathing room is completely gone. The car got upgraded, the apartment got a little nicer. You're eating out more because, hey, you can afford it now. And here's the thing, none of those individual decisions are bad. I'm not going to sit here and shame anyone for getting a nicer car. But collectively, they quietly ate the entire raise. You're making more money and you feel exactly as financially stressed as you did before. Sometimes more stressed, actually, because now you've got bigger bills attached to a bigger lifestyle. And there's this weird psychological thing where losing that lifestyle now feels like a bigger threat than never having had it. People who retire richer than most have, somewhere along the way, made peace with letting there be a gap. Their income goes up and their spending goes up too. I mean, they're human, of course it does a little, but it goes up slower. It lags behind on purpose. That gap between what they earn and what they spend is basically the entire engine of wealth building. It's not really about the raise. It's about protecting the space between the raise and your habits. And I think about it kind of like a water tank with a hole in the bottom. If you keep pouring more water in, but the hole gets bigger every time you pour more in, you never actually fill the tank. Doesn't matter how much water you've got coming from the top. The tank stays empty or close to it forever. Some people are pouring 6 figures into that tank every year, and they're just as broke, relatively speaking, as somebody making 40 grand, because their hole grew right along with the water. And look, I'll be honest with you, I've done this myself. There was a period where I got a bit of extra freelance income coming in, and within a couple months, I'd somehow convinced myself I needed a nicer coffee setup at home, like a genuinely embarrassing amount of money on coffee equipment. Did I need a $400 grinder? No, absolutely not. Nobody needs a $400 grinder. But that's lifestyle creep. It doesn't announce itself. It just kind of tiptoes in, wearing the disguise of, well, I deserve this now. So here's the practical piece, the actionable thing. Every time your income goes up, every single time, no exceptions, before you let your spending catch up, ask, what percentage of this raise can I send straight to savings or investments before I even feel it? Even 50% is transformative. Some people do this thing where they literally never increase their day-to-day spending budget when they get a raise. The raise money goes straight into an account they basically pretend doesn't exist. It sounds almost too simple to work, but that's kind of the point. The best financial habits usually are almost stupidly simple. They're just hard to actually do consistently, which is a very different problem than being complicated. Okay, third sign, and this one's a little more emotional than the first two, honestly, because it touches on stress and fear. And money and fear are basically best friends whether we like it or not. People who end up retiring comfortably tend to treat their emergency fund, and by extension, their long-term savings, as something almost sacred, like untouchable in a way that goes beyond just, I'd rather not. It's more like a rule they've made with themselves that they don't even question anymore. The same way you don't question whether you're going to wear pants to work. It's just not on the table. Contrast that with how a lot of people relate to their savings, where it's this constantly negotiable thing. Well, I'll just dip into it for this one trip. I'll pay it back. I'll just use it for the car repair. That's an emergency, right? And sure, a car repair kind of is an emergency. That's fair. But the pattern, over years, of treating that fund as flexible rather than sacred means it never actually gets to do its job, which is compounding quietly in the background while also protecting you from debt when life throws its inevitable curveballs. Here's why this matters so much more than people realize. The single biggest threat to most people's retirement isn't a bad investment or a market crash. It's debt accumulated during emergencies. Think about it. Somebody's doing fine, saving reasonably, and then the water heater dies, or they lose a job for 4 months, or there's a medical thing, and because they don't have that buffer treated as sacred, they go onto a credit card at 22% interest. And that debt then follows them for years, sometimes decades, quietly siphoning off money that should have been compounding for their future instead of paying interest to a bank. It's honestly kind of devastating when you map it out, because it's not one bad decision. It's the absence of a boundary that would have prevented the bad decision from being necessary at all. I want to paint a picture here because I think it helps. Imagine your emergency fund as like a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. Nobody looks at a fire extinguisher every day and thinks, you know, I could really use that red canister as a doorstop right now. It's just sitting there. Because everyone intuitively understands what it's for. It's for the fire, just the fire. That's the mental model wealthy retirees have with their cash buffer. It's for the fire and only the fire, and everything else finds another way to get solved. The actionable piece here is actually pretty simple, though not always easy emotionally. Define, in writing if you can, what actually counts as an emergency for you. Job loss, medical issue, essential home or car repair that affects safety or ability to work. That's basically it. Vacation isn't an emergency. A sale on something isn't an emergency. Your cousin's wedding, as lovely as it will be, is not an emergency. And once you've drawn that line, the goal is to stop renegotiating it every time you're tempted. Because every time you raid that fund for something non-essential, you're not just losing the money. You're eroding the psychological boundary that makes the fund useful in the first place. And that boundary, once it gets fuzzy, tends to stay fuzzy. So let's just kind of step back for a second and look at these three things together, because I think when you see them side by side, there's actually a common thread running through all of them. And it's not really about numbers at all. It's about patience and boundaries. Thinking in decades instead of paychecks. Letting your spending lag behind your income instead of matching it dollar for dollar. Treating your safety net as sacred instead of flexible. None of these are about being a genius investor. None of them require you to time the market or pick the next big stock or know anything particularly complicated about finance. They're behavioral. They're about the relationship you have with your own impulses, honestly, more than your relationship with money itself. And I think that's actually the hopeful part of all this, if I'm being honest with you. Because it means this isn't fixed. It's not like some people were just born with a good with money gene and the rest of us are stuck. These are habits. Muscles, basically. And muscles can be built at any age, in any income bracket. Someone making $60,000 a year who does these three things consistently will, more often than people expect, retire in a stronger position than someone making $150,000 who doesn't. If you're sitting there right now realizing you don't do any of these three things yet, hey, honestly, take a breath. That's not a failure. That's just information. That's just where you're starting from. The whole point of even talking about this stuff is that awareness is the first domino. You can't build decade thinking or protect a gap between income and spending or treat your emergency fund as sacred if you don't even know those are the things worth doing. Now you know. That's not nothing. So maybe today, or honestly even just this week, pick one. Just one. Maybe it's setting up that automatic transfer the day your paycheck lands, before you even see the number in your checking account. Maybe it's writing down. Actually, writing down what counts as an emergency for you so it's not a decision you have to remake every single time temptation shows up. Small, quiet decisions like that, repeated over years, are basically the entire secret. There's no hidden formula. There's no secret rich people trick they don't want you to know. It's just this, done consistently for longer than feels comfortable. And look, your future self, the one sitting on a porch somewhere in 30 years, not stressed about money, not doing math at midnight, that version of you is being built right now, today, in these small, unglamorous decisions. So build them something good. You've got more control over this than you probably think. Thanks for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.